Righto. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Westport Rating District Joint Committee on Monday, the 29th of September, 2025. I'd just like to welcome everyone here, committee members around the table, members of the public that join us, the media, and those joining us online. Today we have apologies from Councillor Colin Reedy, so I'd just like someone to move that accepts Mark McIntyre, thank you, seconded by Pat Bradley. All in favour say aye. That's carried. I'd just like to note that we've got Councillor Jodie Murray online. We've also got Penny Bicknell, Chantal Mills and Peter Blackwood here. So declarations of interest. Anyone have any declarations of interest? You can bring them up as we go through, or make sure you've got them on the register. Public forum. Now today we've got one member of the public speak, and that's Phil Rutherford. So Phil, you've got 5 minutes to speak, and then after that committee members will have the opportunity to ask any questions or clarifications from Phil. So welcome along, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Now, is that better? Now? All good now? Perfect.
All right, thank you, as I said, Chair Haddock, and good afternoon to all committee members. Look, I won't take 5 minutes, I just want to touch briefly on the subject of democracy and community involvement, community input. I want to make the opening statement that nothing I say today has in any way denigrates the efforts of our current community members. Jodie online somewhere. Jodie obviously has quite a history. She goes back to the Westport 2100 group. A lot of work done there, so I acknowledge that, Jodie. And of course, most of you know Pat, the newcomer to the committee, spent most of his life living beside the Buller River, and pretty well knows all its moods and etc. So I believe they're really good community reps. However, I'm here to ask you that you consider, or the regional council consider, expanding this committee to include more community representation. Obviously, we know that there are most of the rating districts up and down the West Coast that hold annual meetings. Community are involved, and they in turn elect representatives to sit on that committee. That doesn't happen with this particular committee, and I'm asking that you consider doing it. I note that later in the agenda you will be discussing the committee and the governance aspects of it. I do note with some interest that even on the structure chart that this committee doesn't seem to have any input into the Buller District Council, not according to this chart, which then for me would get the question, why is it even still going to be a joint committee including Buller District Council if it is not feeding back in directly back into the Buller District Council? I just noted that. I note also that in your LTP on page 75, I think it is, of the LTP, there is a discussion on a review of all rating district committees, and I would suggest to you that this will provide the ideal opportunity to consider what I'm presenting to you here this afternoon. Will be an interesting challenge for you, of course, if you decide, as per the agenda item 8.3, in terms of how you strike the rates and who should be in and who should be out. Clearly, that is also going to provide an opportunity for discussion, because what is being suggested in today's paper, I see, is far wider than just the people directly affected or who benefit from the building of the scheme. I agree, of course, it seems a bit odd that someone living in Waimea Terrace currently would be paying the same dollars per capital value as those that are within the actual affected area, including myself living here in Westport. And of course, there is some question about what is the logic of that when we know that there are other communities, such as an established community out of Carter's Beach, established and growing, of course, that Westport is also their main service centre. It seemed to me to be very little difference in those two scenarios. Alma Road There are those people who are going to directly benefit from the scheme, i.e. those who are living in the flood affected area, and there are those who are going to benefit, they live outside of it, Westport being their main service centre. So absolutely agree with what you're proposing under 8.3, bit of a challenge there, but I do encourage you to pursue that for those reasons I've just explained. Thanks, Chair. I've got nothing else.
Thanks, Phil. You can stay at the table despite anyone asking any questions. Look, if I could just answer some of your, we've had this before at rating district meetings. So, as you know, we've got quite a few rating districts throughout the West Coast, but we have 4 that include our major towns. So, Westport, Greymouth, Hokitika, and Franz Joseph. Now, neither Hokitika or Grey have community representatives because the representatives around the table are your elected representatives of councillors. So, you know, in Bulla you've got the mayor as an elected representative and your two councillors, plus on the regional council side you've got the chair plus the 2 of your Westport elected members or the Bulla elected members. So, and that's the same on the other 2. At Franz Joseph, because there was quite a big contentious issue about letting the river go to the south side and a major effect on that community, and the difference between the north and the south side to be protected, it was decided to actually get 4 representatives from either side there. But I take your point, and I do understand, you know, the more representation you've got, the better. But I just want to make that note to anyone watching online that the people around the table are elected representatives that represent your community. So that's just that. So thanks, Phil. Anyone got any questions or clarifications from Phil?
Just got one from the chair. I think one of the reasons that this rating district is getting quite a bit of a spotlight on it is because we're now, with modern technology, able to have differential rating, whereas in the past it was just too complicated to have it all split up into various sort of proportions. And this new age allows us to explore the differentials, and I think it's going to be an interesting time when we debate a fair distribution of the differentials. So, like you say, Oamaru people, they say, well, I built up here purposely because I'm up out of the road, so why am I lumbered with a full rating? Whereas I think, well, the jury's still out on that at this stage. We're just still going to go back and forth to the community, I'd say, before we finally say this is what we reckon is a fair differential application.
Thanks, Councillor. Anyone else got any questions?
Can I just quickly respond to what you had to say?
Sure.
Look, I understand that. I obviously follow and have a look about what's happening in other special rating districts. I appreciate what you said. The point I'd make is not all ratepayers, when they're voting for their councils, understand that they're on this committee to represent them in terms of advice to West Coast Regional Council on flood protection matters. So just pointing that out, that the many in our community will not have a clue that that is the case. But if they had an opportunity to attend an annual meeting of the rating district and have input that way, it might, you know, make them at least feel a little bit more included. So
thanks, Phil. I think Daryl might have a question or.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for that presentation and some of the questions you raised, and I think they're really good ones, actually, Phil. Thank you. A couple of points I want to make is that under the standing orders in terms of reference for this joint committee, it's entirely up to the committee how many, if you want to alter the number of community representatives on this committee, that's up to this committee to decide. And if you'd like to do that, can I suggest that the right time to do that is probably after local body elections, and then, you know, reset the elected membership, and then it's up to the committee to decide if you want more community reps there. That's the first thing. The second thing is to your point around how this goes up to the regional council and not Bulla. So this joint committee is solely for the purposes of governing the flood scheme, not not any of the other elements like the stormwater or the adaptation fund or any of those other sorts of things. It's all about doing the flood scheme. And this committee makes recommendations up to the ultimate deciders on the flood scheme, which is the West Coast Regional Council. And that's why the hard line goes up to there and not into Bulla, is by way of explanation. And the final point is, you raise about the rating and the differential rating, and there's a paper on that today, and that's going to be, I think, the major consideration of this joint committee in its existence. The big sort of decisions or recommendations, I should say, that you're going to have to consider back to the regional councils on that differential rating thing, which is going to really probably occupy your minds between now and 30 June to adoption of the annual plan. Thanks.
Look, thanks for that. And if you don't mind, I don't want to be nitpicky, but this reference about reporting back to Bulla District Council in your papers before you, the paper considering the governance, it actually gives specific reference to this committee does also report back to District Council within the papers, but it doesn't show it on this paper. Just point that out here.
No,
anyway, thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Phil, and thanks very much for your submission today. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yep. So we've got Maura Wingham from NZTA online as well. Welcome, Maura. And look, I'm sorry, I actually omitted to introduce our council staff here as well that are online. So Michael Beagle over here. So Michael's our Group Manager of Catchments, and Tom Hopkins. Tom's our project lead for these projects, and Tom's been doing a great job on that. Michael's just recently joined the council, so welcome guys as well. Right, next item is a confirmation, item 5, confirmation of minutes of Westport Rating District Joint Committee meeting on the 2nd of April 2025, and they are on pages 2 to 20 of our minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes at all? Joe? Yep. Councillor Howard?
Just on page 8, bullet point 4, there's just a typo. It should be Carter's Beach, not Carter's Creek.
Correct. Yep. Thank you. It's noted. Any further corrections? Right. Would someone like to move that they are true and correct? Thanks, Mayor Klein. Seconder for that. Councillor McIntyre. All in favour, say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any matters arising from those minutes that aren't covered in our papers today? Nothing. Righto. We will go to the next item 6, which is an actions list, and they're on pages 22 to 24 of our meeting papers. And I will just get on the right page myself for those. Which one here? Right, so the first action is action 1. I'm on the right page, yep. And that is bring a recommended prudent reserve to the 23-24 Joint Committee. So the method for determining setting a prudent reserve for Rating District will be reviewed as part of the Rating District Scheme Review scheduled for Year 2 of West Coast Regional Council's long-term plan. Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
Insofar as committee members might remember, at the last meeting, I explained the method that council has in place for calculating prudent reserve for a given rating district. Sometimes that method seems to come out with prudent reserve levels that are realistic or physically achievable for a given rating district. And we are keen to look at how that method is calculated, because the reality of it is that it's very closely linked to insurances, and particularly insurance excess. So we do need to set a prudent reserve for this rating district. We felt it better to leave it and do it as part of that scheme review when we're looking across the whole region and how prudent reserves are set generally.
Anyone got any questions of Tom on that? Daryl, do you have
just a couple of comments on that. Firstly, loosely, or part of the equation is asset value, and we don't have the full scheme built, so we don't know the value of the assets. Is one of the part of the equation set in the prudent reserve. So that's still to come. But the second thing in Tom's comment around insurance is West Coast Regional Council is renegotiating its insurance with our broker across all of our schemes coming up in the next few months, and that needs to sort of wash through before we can sort of see where we might sit on a prudent reserve. What I would say though is we make a recommendation around what the prudent reserve level should be to every scheme. It's entirely up to the scheme committees, including this committee, whether you want to achieve that prudent reserve and how quickly you want to build up that reserve to meet it or not, or accept a lower or higher reserve. But we do give the advice, the recommendation, and it's strongly tied into insurance and then NEMA payout as well in terms of expectations there. So look, there's a little bit of work still to do here, but that will be a definite paper probably over the next 6 months that will come to this joint committee to outline that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's ongoing. Diane, thanks. We'll note that. The second one was response to questions. Item 2 raised by Paul Reynolds, and he spoke. So the government hierarchy is covered in item 8.2, and other items are note we responded to and write Mr. Reynolds' response to his email. Item 3, that was respond to questions raised by Margaret Montgomery when she spoke at the public forum, and the catchment management team are responding directly to Mr. Montgomery to explain how the new assets are transitioned as they are completed to business as usual operating and maintenance activity under the care of West Coast Regional Council Senior Asset Lead and Area Engineer Northern. The question about Organs Island will be covered in 8.1. Item 4, that's complete. Item 5 is complete. Item 6, that's once the terms of reference approved by each of the parent council to get the terms of reference signed by the relevant parties. So that's in progress. We've only got one signature I see to remain to be obtained. So I hope that's pretty close to being sorted. Item 7 is complete. Item 8 is complete. Item 9, that was it's ongoing. That's raised with DIA the concerns regarding the transfer of money transferred from the planting Organs Island to the Westport Steering Group. And this item has been raised on a number of occasions with DIA and is on the agenda at the next steering group meeting at the 10th of October. I'd just like to speak to that. That has been brought up at every one of the steering group meetings and just about resilient Westport's meetings. And I still find that's, wasn't quite right there. I'm sure a lot of councillors do. That went to the General Contingency Fund, but that's a major item for the protection of the Oroites. You guys know a lot more than me about that. So that's still ongoing. Item 10 is complete. Item 11 is complete. Has anyone got any comments on the actions list before I move that? Mayor Klein?
Just to comment on action point 9, we've got one resident Westport meeting due before the end of the training, so we'll try and get that sorted then.
Yep.
There seemed to be a little bit of different approach from the minister on his recent visit, so I think we've got a little bit of leeway to have a conversation about some of the original terms and conditions on some of that funding.
Agree, thank you. Further questions or about that? What the recommendation is to receive the actions list and the information noted. Do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Cole. All in favour say aye. Right. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Chair's report. Item 7. So since our last meeting on the 2nd of April, the project to protect Westport has moved significantly on the planning, geotechnical and consenting front. Construction of the aviary has been awarded and physical work will commence shortly once the resource consent has been completed. And that will be followed by other construction stages. On the 5th of August, we had a meeting with the Carters Beach residents, and this meeting was positive and was an opportunity for Council's Chief Engineer, Peter Blackwood, to present proposals and council to answer any questions of that community. At this point, I would like to thank Mark McIntyre and the late Frank Dooley for coming up with the idea of getting local businesses on board to provide funding for the shortfall associated with both Carter's Beach and Snodgrass. The generosity of those businesses cannot be underestimated, and I'm hopeful that the government will stump up with the Crown share to support the local business share. So as we know, the Crown's been putting in 60% and local share's been 40%, so I hope we can get a 60% share from government going forward. Last week we hosted Minister Simon Watts, as Jamie just alluded to, and staff gave a presentation of the Resilient Westport work, which was well received. We also showed Minister Watts' physical work being undertaken on other resilient projects at Hokitika prior to his flying out. He didn't come to Westport, he just flew into Greymouth for the lay and flew out. But it was a really good presentation. Thank the staff for that. As I did not seek re-election this coming term, this will be our last Westport Rating District Joint Committee meeting. But I'd like to personally thank our Chief Executive Darryl Liu, Chief Engineer Peter Blackwood, Project Engineer Jordan Mandry, Resilient Westport staff Penny, Christine, Brian, Trudy, Steph and Amanda for all the other staff for their input into this important resilient project for Westport and its community. To the community members, committee members, thank you. Mayor Jamie Klein, I know you've been passionate and put a lot of work into this. So thank you and your councillors and to your staff. But all other consultants and contractors, affected landowners and stakeholders, thank you for your input and commitment. There's so much work that has to be done before the actual physical works can actually happen on those land acquisitions. There's once that's finally designed, then we've got the geotechnical work, and there's a massive amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes. So thank you to those guys. Also like to thank Paul Barker from DIA and Mike Mendonca, who's the chair of the steering group, and the government agencies that are all involved. So everyone's put a great effort in, and it's been huge. But my parting request to staff would be to leave no stone unturned to progress completion, so the last stone is placed will give peace of mind and security that the people of this region deserve from the power of the mighty bullet. But I, like you, all cannot wait to see this project completed and another of our regional towns protected. Someone like to move the chair's report. Thank you, Mark McIntyre. Seconded by Pat. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Item 8, reports. Westport Flood Protection Scheme project update. So Tom and Peter, are you both leading this? Peter Blackwood. Welcome,
Yes,
Peter.
I'm just trying to get my thing on. Where has it
Here you
gone?
go. Yeah, Peter.
Hold on a minute. Can't find my thing. Oh,
Hidden under the paperwork, Peter.
hear me? Yeah,
Hear you
you should be able
clearly.
to hear me now. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to come on too soon. Okay, so this is an extensive paper, but I'm not going to go on in great detail. You've all had the opportunity to read it. I'm going to talk about the general update, and then I'm going to go to the Gantt chart, which shows where we are. So I will go through the general update in quite a bit. You can all hear me okay, is that correct? Thank you. Okay, so just the first point that the Cats Creek Stop Bank and the McKenna's were largely done the previous financial year, and we've applied for a deed of grant to finish off the 10-metre gap to the Kiwi Rail Bridge, which Kiwi Rail were not happy with, but we've applied for the paperwork and the approvals to complete that. Final design was completed on the Avery Stop Bank and the consent lodged and contract let for construction, pending granting of the resource consent. There's a lot of things in play here that need to be considered. It is a complex consent. It's beside the coastal marine area. We did change options from a flood wall to a stop bank across the Avery's culvert for geotechnical reasons. Yes. So for geotechnical reasons. So that's good. So we're expecting that consent might be granted pretty soon. Now, I want to comment on, there's been an armada of geotechnical assessments and design on the balance of the scheme. Been doing those designs on the lower Buller, north end, over end of the Averys through to State Highway 67 bridge, upper Buller, upper Orowaiti. So all those have been worked on, and we've also been working on Carters, and at present, Snodgrass is paused, but work might start again soon on design there. So an important thing is we put out a brief for the consenting of the upper Buller, because the upper Buller stops the water going through town. So that sends more in the river and adds about 15 centimeters to levels down in Carters. So we were looking at doing those two consents together. We put out a request for quotes and we got a good response, and we've appointed someone a week ago, and we would expect on their time frame, which I see they've now sent me a minorly revised one, but they're intending to have a resource consent ready to deliver to consents at the very beginning of December. That's their plan. Comment on Aqualink. They've completed the dynamic model of groundwater under Westport. This is a really important project. It's shared between ourselves, Buller District Council, Stormwater, and another agency of Buller, Climate Change. And so it looks at where the groundwater gets to. An additional 40,000 was provided to us by EnviroLink to produce a dynamic model. So that simulates it as the tide goes up and down, and underneath where you're sitting now, as the tide goes up and down on the groundwater underneath. And that is a far more accurate way. It is not, if it's a static one, then it tends to overestimate groundwater levels. So we've got the dynamic one, which is really, really good. It also tells us what will happen with climate change. And so there's maps that show our areas become, the lower areas become more susceptible to high water tables with climate change. In my summary, I've not talked about upper Orowaiti, but I'd like to talk about upper Orowaiti. We're progressing well there. The landowner gave permission. There's a final few boreholes, and we've commissioned the very final design on upper Orowaiti, and I'm hopeful that we'll get that built this financial year. Then there's upper Buller, also a very, very important area. We've commissioned the final design there, and it really depends how the consenting works as to when we would start work there. Carters, just speaking not from the section here, but from Carters, we had I think it was a pretty successful meeting attended by about 100 people. We received a couple, or more than a couple of comments from a few about the flooding of Carters and what's causing it, but we did go back to the Buller District Council to identify houses that flooded in 2021. Snodgrass, we had a meeting about a year ago, and we're working through that again. We're doing a further round robin of the inhabitants, what they think of the proposal, do they support it? And I think things are looking pretty rosy overall for Snodgrass. Organs Island planting, I think Daryl will want to say something here, but I just want to finish my section, and I'll come back to that. I want to refer you to page 35 of your agendas. That has a Gantt chart on it. Now, at the top is the year and the quarter. So where it's, for example, where it says 2026, that's the 1st of January, 2026. And where it says through to Q2, it's the end of Q2, that's the end of the financial year. So as you look through that, we're expecting to complete Avery's construction. Whether construction proceeds within the year on Upper Buller depends on the consenting successfulness. We've been working pretty hard on that and identifying potentially affected parties, and our consultant has agreed with our assessment of that. Go down to the floating lagoon. So we're hopeful of completing the floating lagoon this financial year too. Upper Orowaiti, I've just mentioned. That Upper Orowaiti, looks like we will be able to complete that. The remainder would all be next financial year. And so we need to understand that. I'll go back to Organs Island, if that's okay, on page 25. So that's obviously really important to reduce overflows into the Orowaiti. And I'll just make a note that under the current climate, flood levels in Snodgrass actually drop due to the effect of the proposed Organs Island. Obviously, the trees have to grow a bit, or we may look at other options. But then there's the issue that the planting has been absorbed into the program contingency, and we've made further application in tranche 3. And we're still trying to get the ownership of this land confirmed. So I would like to hand over to Daryl Liu to comment further on Organs Island, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So look, Organs Island on a number of fronts really. So firstly, Organs Island is still under the administration of LINZ. And it's been like that for a long time. It was the absolute intention of the government to get the administration of that land to the regional council, and it was going to do it, and it's committed to doing it by firstly doing a crown-to-crown transfer of the land from LINZ to DOC, and then DOC would vest the land in the regional council for flood management purposes in a vesting reserve sense. We've been waiting for near on 2 years for that transaction to happen. And at our last council meeting, councillors led by Councillor Cole basically stated that if we don't see demonstrable progress from the Crown agencies on that transfer process, then they're going to instruct staff to write to the Minister of Conservation and the Chief Executive of the Department of Conservation to try and get some movement on that. I'm pleased to report that as a result of some of that publicity, both LINZ and DOC seem to be moving on that as we speak. So that's still under a watching brief, but there is movement, which is probably more movement in the last couple of years. So that's the first thing is to actually, it has been registered to survey the land, and it's just that transfer process. And what I've said to both DOC and LINZ is before any formal transfer happens between LINZ and DOC and the Regional Council through the reserve, we need to see the terms and conditions of all of those contractual land arrangements to make sure that they're not foreclosing on any way we want to administer that land from a flood scheme perspective. When it comes to what we actually need to do on Organs Island, that was well traversed in the business case. And look, it's been talked about here. The issue is that at the moment within the project budget, that there is no money for the funding of that work, and there is a point of contention between the Regional Council and the Department of Internal Affairs about whether there was an intention to fund that out of the government money, and that will go again into the steering group. However, what we have done is to cover our bases, we have included money for the Organs Island work as part of tranche 3 of the Regional Infrastructure Fund. And so we've bidded in for that. And that's been submitted as as part of a list of projects for tranche 3. Lastly, we have commissioned a specialist river engineer to work specifically on Organs Island and come up with the full range of options for what needs to happen there. There's still some significant questions outstanding around the nature and the form of what we do on Organs Island to secure those overflows. And we expect some reports to come back on that soon. And we've just been in receipt of a major report from our consultants at Land River Sea on that as well. So that's in train as well. So a number of balls in the air around Organs Island, and we hope that the progress on the land transfer will be through soon.
If I could just clarify also about the Organs Island planting, the recommendation from the council was that if there wasn't significant progress with those government agencies, it would go to a ministerial level. So hopefully we will, and that's in the short term. So hopefully that will happen. Before I actually just open it up to questions, Peter, I just will move the recommendation that the council resolve to receive and the report and note the attachments. So someone like to move those, please? Pat, thank you. Second by Jody. Was that you, Jody? Put your hand up, was it? Thank you. All in favour? Say aye. Against? That's carried. Open up the questions of Peter and Tom or Daryl. Jamie?
My only question is, I note that a lower bullet bit has flagged contamination risk and archaeological stuff. Was that likely to affect budget, or I could see they're getting quite expensive?
Yeah, at this point in time, I'm not expecting a significant variance due to that. We've had a desktop exercise, and now we've got a field exercise by an expert in that field for the archaeological, and we need a DSI report from our designers. But look, it'll affect budget if you've got to remove a lot of contaminants, but sometimes it's better not to remove the contaminants. And I think probably that's how it will go. If the contaminants there were affecting groundwater quality, then I guess that's another issue. But at this point in time, we've thought about it, and we think it's unlikely to be of any major consequence. But it is a very good question.
So you are you actually suggesting, Peter, they be encapsulated? Is that what you're doing?
That's one way of dealing with it. Yes.
Thank you. Further questions of?
Could I say that further? That's probably what will happen at the floating lagoon too. Yeah.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah.
Given that the land transfer might occur in the next 6 months, when would planting on Organs Island actually begin?
Yeah, good question, but pretty difficult for me to answer at the moment. I don't want to rule out some other short-term measures, such as a low bund or something of that effect, as a temporary measure, given that planting is probably going to take many years before it grows to a point where it's fully effective. So I know that planting has been talked about as being the main piece of work on Organs Island, but it might not be the only piece of work that we do. And when we talk about planting, you know, there's all sorts of decisions to be made. Is it exotic plantation forestry, or is it native planting and their respective growth rates, etc., before full effect comes into play there? So, but it was certainly, there'll be something done on Organs Island, certainly inside the next 2 construction seasons.
So that's your question, Pat. Thank you. Any further questions? Is that you, Jody? Do you have? No, Jody? No? Okay. No further questions? Right. Thanks very much, Peter, for that update. It's appreciated. Thanks for your time on that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we'll move on then to item 8.2, which is the Westport Flood Protection Scheme governance structure. And the recommendation is to the committee to receive the report. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thanks, Mark McIntyre. Seconded by Councillor Cole. All in favour, say aye. Against? It's carried. Right, Daryl, over to you on this one. So,
Look, I would welcome, any further commentary, on this from Mayor Klein and Chair Haddock. Look, I want to acknowledge, even for staff, it's been quite a layered and sometimes confusing governance structure around this project. Certainly something that I've never seen the like of for a project like this, but it is symptomatic of the fact that you've got interests of Buller District Council, the West Coast Regional Council, the community, and then the Crown. And in the Crown, there's at least 3 different government agencies that have got an interest. So, and given that the Crown is the majority funder, they wanted a stake in that. So that's how the steering group came about, as an almost another layer over it. I think the good news from an understanding, a simplicity perspective, is that the government officials on the steering group are indicating that they would like the steering group to be wound up probably before Christmas, and there would still be Crown oversight of the expenditure, but in terms of the steering group, that would no longer be required from their point of view. That would mean that the full governance of this project here on out will come to this joint committee. And I think that probably, would answer or some of the questions and provide a lot more information through this committee and out to the community. So look, that's probably where things are going from a simplifying the governance structures over this project. I would just also add what I said before. The joint committee makes recommendations. It's not a decision-making body like all of our joint committees and rating districts. And for the structural flood protection, which is the key issue here, that goes to the West Coast Regional Council for final decision and adoption, including the rates. I'd be interested in perhaps Mayor Klein's comments on this first, but particularly given the issue of the stormwater project and adaptation fund and other things is pretty critically intertwined into this, and how you see that being communicated and governed as well, and community input. Mayor Klein.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. I think comments around why we ended up with this structure we've got was we can't ignore that I think both councils were in quite a different place immediately after the floods. And so there was a recognition that the package of works sat across both councils who arguably weren't working very well together. And so it sought to compel, I guess, both councils to complete their portions of the work rather than it being lost. So it was a bit of an accountability thing from the Crown's point of view, I think, and they recognised that. And I think the other thing was around recognising that the whole suite of projects needed to all work together rather than some of them dropping off or being lost. And so it's fitting that we look at it as the BDC-led projects are largely complete, and really does, with the exception of the adaptation funding, the work really is now very much in the ballpark of regional council to complete. What was the other part of the thing you wanted to comment on? Oh, stormwater. So stormwater will sit with our capital projects team, and we've got that funding riff in. I heard that we are expecting some sort of decision on that in the next few weeks, so that will be good. And that will just flow through in terms of the engineering, operational side of it. My expectation is the 2 council teams are working together on that integration from a practical engineering point of view. But BDC will be dealing with the stormwater elements of that through our animal projects team and reporting to full council. And the adaptation funding, which is the last key part of BDC's bit of the original government funding. We're really just waiting on final design and alignment from regional, and then we can have a meaningful conversation around how that might be applied to how many properties and the like.
Yeah, to follow on from Jamie, I always wondered too, why the steering group was there, but it quickly came apparent to me that the government, because they actually given so much money, were making sure that there was capability and capacity, especially on the regional council side. I mean, we were pretty dysfunctional when I came on board as council, and I don't blame the government for looking for some accountability and also to make sure that we could successfully complete or get these projects. So the council, as you know, employed Peter Blackwood and a whole lot of staff, Jordan, and we've got a great team. You know, Tom, we've got Michael, we've got a fabulous team at the council now that's capable of doing it. Plus, there was also working together on a united front with Buller District Council. So we actually have worked really good, and not to put aside too that both the councils didn't have their chief executives sort of stability. We've got that there now at the council. So I think the government now are looking to hand that sort of role down. I think they've got sufficient confidence in the councils going forward. Given that also the steering group doesn't have any voting powers, it's actually really just there's no voting powers wanted. It was really just make a conversation and working with its independent chairperson. But like Jamie said, I think the government are looking forward now. They've indicated that the steering group would be done away with. I guess that will be dependent on what happens after the local body elections. They'll be looking at that, so I'll be looking for a continuation of that good work going forward, I'd imagine. So I would hope myself that this that governance level would be coming back to this joint committee. That would be my hope. So I'll open up to any other comments of committee members of how they think going forward. Councillor Howard.
I'd just like to say I think that'd be a really, really good idea. It does depend on the people that are elected in and that they work together. But I felt in the past it's a bit disjointed from the rating committee. We haven't had that many meetings, so I sort of feel as if we've been a little bit in the dark, and what can tell the community hasn't had that much depth. I think it'd be really good from the public's point of view and understanding what's happening to have it brought into the rating committee.
Any other comments from Darryl? Do you want to speak again?
Yeah, just going forward and presuming that, by about Christmas time, the steering group is disbanded and it comes back to this joint committee as the main committee that we report to, then up to the respective councils. But can I just make the offer to all the members here, if there is more information that you want, if you want more regular check-ins, if you're getting, feeling that the community needs information on a particular issue, please let us know, because really relying on you all to tell us what further things you need and what information you need and when you need it, right? So happy to be up here much more often, even having more meetings, but only if that's what is required and what you're hearing the community needs. Thanks.
Councillor Howard.
Apologise for not raising it. I guess one thing that's we had the Carter speech, we've had the meeting with Carter speech people, but I don't think Westport people understand how does it impact on the amount they're being asked to contribute. What is the effect of protecting Carter speech on Westport? So I just don't think that's been open enough, and I don't think that's really been discussed on this rating committee. So I'm not to say it's not needed, and I understand it's needed because to get the consent and protection that's the Buller, we need to do Carter's, but I don't think it's been really explained out there in the public.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. And just in response to that, I think you're right, but I want to assure you that there's been no decisions been made yet, and that conversation that we need to have with the ratepayers is coming. And that will be formal consultation under the Local Government Act and Special Consultative Process. And that conversation starts in earnest this afternoon with the paper on the rating that we've got here. So that is certainly something that needs to happen and is coming, and it's the right time to do it now with where the scheme is at. Thank you.
The only other thing I guess to flag is one of the things with Resilient Westport and the steering group has been the comms team and the office in the public face. So we'll need to give some thought as to what the future of that is if the steering group winds up, and whether that transitions just a straight out regional council comms role or who picks that up.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, fine. Councillor Cole, if you wish to.
I would imagine that the regional council will be able to take over that role from there on, because it will be a much simpler process. Prior to that, they were having to, the steering group and the rating group as well. So I think it'll be kind of a simpler setup. It won't be needed as much.
So just want to note too, on Councillor Howard's question about Snodgrass and Carter's Beach, they were specifically left out of the government's funding package here. So there wasn't enough money for those communities, but the council didn't want to leave, or both councils didn't want to leave those communities left out. So there's been work going on behind the scenes while the rest of the scheme is progressing to see if there's a way to protect both those communities. So it was lucky that that the council has actually worked to get some outside funding for that, but that's not enough money to do the job. It will require government to put some more money into that. So we're still stuck with that. There's no guarantee that either of those will go ahead. They're not in the package, but I guess we've got to get through the whole scheme and see how that works. And that's a situation going forward, but we wouldn't need government funding for those. But it has been proven by the engineers. The reason Snodgrass was left out was because there was a flow path of the river, but our council engineers in conjunction with WSP have actually sort of proved that that's not going to affect the southern side of the Arawaiti significantly by actually allowing protection there, and that was why the government left that out. That's my understanding. But the problem with Carter's Beach is that the scheme might actually affect Carter's Beach, so that's why the council are looking at trying to incorporate Carter's in that as well, which was left out of the package originally.
Yeah, and in terms of Snodgrass, WSP in conjunction with ourselves have carefully conceived a plan there that will not cause that elevation of flood levels. I think it was by 0.3 or 0.4, 0.3 or 0.4 of a meter. But this one doesn't. It's within about 5 centimeters. So that's a much more conceived approach. And if we'd had a bit more time, we might have even made it better. But I think we've optimized it. And you're entirely correct with what you've said on Carter's. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a question. Firstly, I just want to start by saying I really want to acknowledge the Councillor Frank and Councillor McIntyre on that for the efforts they've done, and then to raise money for those two communities that were not funded by the government package, and then the businesses in the town of Bathurst mining 10 and for electricity. Collectively, I think Mr. McIntyre, it's about 1.8. So it probably comes back to about 1.7, 1.8. So what we're hoping, and this will be dependent on the final design alignment and costings, but that could make up the vast majority of the local share for that. And just like I said with Organs Island, we are now entered into the bidding for tranche 3 of the Regional Infrastructure Fund, with the hope that government might meet 60% of the costs of those two communities that were left out, as a way of being able to finance that. And obviously combined with hopefully a government contribution as well as the business contribution, lessening the rating impact on the community and specifically for Snodgrass and for Carters. So we remain optimistic, and I know that my staff, Michael, who's well used to dealing with Kānoa here today, as well as Tom, are meeting with Kānoa officials about exactly that, those matters tomorrow, I think it is. Is that right, Michael? Yeah, thank you.
Right, so any more conversation or questions about that item 8.2? No? Okay, thanks very much. We'll move on then to item 8.3. Will we joint committee formation? Have we moved? Jan, have we moved and seconded that? Yep. So righto, 8.3. Rating for the Westport Special Rating District. So we've got several recommendations here. I'll move the first 1 and 2. Receive the report and note the attached draft paper. So I'm happy to move that, those two parts of it. Councillor McIntyre second that. All in favour? Right. That's carried. Right, before we move the other ones, I'll hand over to you, Darryl.
So joint committee members, you may remember your last meeting some months ago now, but you had a substantial and rather long presentation, I remember, on the recommended options for a differential rating for the scheme, which is moving away from a single uniform rating. So today in the papers, I think you have the report that goes with that written up, and some commentary around how we propose to move on that matter. So ultimately, and we've taken some legal advice on this as well. So ultimately, this is a matter of a special consultative process under the Local Government Act. That will probably commence around March, April, and will be a formal consultative process with the Buller community, and probably wider than that as well across the West Coast. So what is envisaged here is a differential rating, and by definition, what that means is that the people that receive the most benefit pay the most rates, and the people that receive a lesser benefit pay a lesser rating. Critical to that is direct and indirect benefit. So direct benefit is if the scheme wasn't there, you would be flooded in a 100-year flood, but noting that there's differentials in there. And then the notion of indirect rating. And indirect rating is where you wouldn't get flooded by the river, but you are receiving benefit from accessing the town and its services of Westport by virtue of the flood scheme protecting those services, such as the supermarket and the dentist and the doctors and the council and all those other things that you probably people come to town for. To my mind, and I'm just signalling this to you, I think there's two options for a differential rating scheme. One is a rather confined option, which basically combines it to the valley of the Buller, and then a more expensive differential rating, which says that other settlements outside of the valley, and here I'm talking about Karamea, Charleston, perhaps some, up the Buller Gorge there, they would be rated for the flood scheme on a differential basis because they receive indirect benefit as being a second option. Now, we'd probably likely consult on those two options, and then inside those two options, we'd make it very clear per $100,000 worth of property value what the ratings would be based on the differential benefit classes. So you've got a report here. Can I say, joint committee members, that I know that you've been sort of searching for what is your role here, what is your voice, how do you sort of involved in really governing this project? Well, I want to say to you that this is probably one of the biggest decisions that is coming to you to make a recommendation back to the regional council And would like to hear from this joint committee a really good discussion on that from now and in successive meetings leading up to that special consultative process. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to canvass the whole community through a consultative process, but we do need a recommendation from this joint committee on what your preference is back to the regional council. So look, I'm happy to take, any other questions, Mr. Chair, but this is a very big decision, an important decision, and a critical one for the wider community. And I think this is really the time now for this joint committee to start to get your head around the report, express a view. But I know it's complicated, and I'm very happy for staff to meet in a workshop situation over the next few months, coming up to Christmas, after Christmas, leading up to the special consultative process, to really help you understand the intricacies of this and get you in a position where you can hopefully make a recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre,
I've got one
followed by Councillor Howard, then Pat.
I've got one question there, Darryl. It's another layer of complexity that you've got people in Karamea and Makanui are already paying for a flood scheme. On top of that. Right. So it's another layer of complexity that needs to be acknowledged.
Yes, it is. And one of our fellow councillors from the Grey constituency calls it double jeopardy. That, for instance, people in Karamea will still be paying into the Karamea scheme as well as the Westport scheme, which really brings into question a much more fundamental question around the administration of how you actually rate and fund these things, given that the long history of the regional council is to make each scheme its own entity with 100% targeted rating from each of the schemes, and to have no cross subsidisation at all, or a thought on how we might unify a bunch of independent schemes into one rating, for instance, because that's what does happen in some other councils around New Zealand. So there's some big questions in there. Thanks.
Councillor Howard.
I'd just like to say, I think it'd be really good to workshop this because there'll be new council representatives at the table. They need to understand a bit more about the rating. I think that's very good points there. Certainly when we've looked at assets such as water and affordability and everything, we've looked at what's the best structure for district. I think you could also take the knowledge of like the Perk Centre for recreation. People from Karamea come in and use that. So we're protecting these assets which the whole of the community own, and so there is an indirect benefit. The rate's going to be very small for a place like Karamea, but they do get a benefit. One point I'd like to raise is that they've acknowledged when you get to the indirect benefit, there's a capital value and there's a uniform annual charge. And I question why we haven't added the uniform annual charge into the Westport properties, because everyone benefits from the public assets in the flooding zone. So that's a public good, which is covered under the uniform annual charge. So to me, it makes sense that we also include them Westport, using the same argument for the other regions while we're adding one. And I think that may be a little bit of levelling out between some people that might be a big company but have few capital assets. So it's sort of balancing that everyone in that zone actually benefits from the town being protected.
Yep.
So it'd be good to have a bit more about option of bringing in an annual charge when we do a workshop, sort of analogy of what would be, how would that play out in effect?
Respond to that first, Harold.
Yeah, look, I think a workshop on the neutronium would be the right thing to do. Thanks, councillor. Regional council does have a uniform annual charge across the region, and there is a limit to the percentage that you can use that for, I think, but I'll leave that to the workshop because I think there's some legalities there. Yeah, thanks.
Pat.
I just noticed that when I was reading all this, the rating for this proposal will stop north of Turamoana, but Punakaiki is part of the Bulla District Council rating district. And I don't know why Punakaiki area would not be included in this proposal.
I think that's one of the million-dollar questions, actually. So, and this is going to come down to a governance decision, really. It was put to the Regional Council senior staff that while Punakaiki is in the Bulla district, people in Punakaiki are more likely to go through to Greymouth for services than they are to come to Westport. Now, I'm sure that's a controversial statement, Mayor Klein, but that's I will be 100% guided by this joint committee and ultimately the Regional Council on that matter, and I'm sure a submission on the special consultative process by Bulla District Council. So nothing's set in stone at the moment, and that's a big question, and we'll take that on advice.
Councillor Cole.
I just want to report. Bradley said comment that didn't like, and I saw a comment that said, "Oh, people would probably in a flood, not towards Westport because of the other access Westport, but by the same token, it'll be a similar sort of storm in Greymouth, and they won't be able to access Greymouth because the flooding will be at that whole creek at Wing Hut." So, yeah, but that was a dodge to the we know exactly, yeah, and I agree with Pat. I think really still, but back in a differentially acceptable level of contribution. The more people we get into the scheme, the cheaper it's going to be. Everybody.
Thank you.
My question is a little bit different. I'm just wondering whether or not there's merit in it or not. Is looking at, it seems to have put quite a fly in the ointment having Westport Carters and Snodgrass. I'm wondering if Westport and Carters are legally effectively got to happen together, and the Snodgrass is treated separately and resolved as a, because it's going to have a different level and resolved as its own thing, because it's going to have a different level of service, my understanding, than Westport and Carters, and whether or not there's merit in just building the Snodgrass thing, but it not being sort of considered as part of the Westport scheme, because it's not negatively impacting Westport and it's not a requirement for Westport consenting, and whether that helps the the variances we're seeing in the per $100,000 capital value thing, which seems to be making it really hard to make it feel kind of fair.
Again, that valid point. I guess what's driving some of my thinking and the staff's thinking on this is for the size of our operation, the West Coast Regional Council with 23 individual rating districts has got too many jam jars, and trying to administer all these things is quite significant and adding a lot of overhead, and aggregation up to a lesser number would be desirable from a cost administration point of view. So that is a sort of a driver, one of the drivers for the thinking. And the second piece of thinking is, it's all Bulla River water, that's driving it. So maybe that takes to one scheme. And let's remember here, this rating will be about the maintenance, of the and the payback of the loans. And I do know that, especially with Snodgrass, the issue of the adaptation fund comes into play, and we'll have to see where that sits, because it may be that, if a substantial portion is used for Snodgrass, well, it may not be a significant loan to pay back, of course. So there's a number of matters there. Yeah.
So I guess that raises the other thing around whether or not, because it feels like if we are, because I kind of agree, I do see the merit of it all being treated as one for simplicity. But if we're going to go down that road, then why don't we advocate that we just put all the money in one pot as well? so the business share, the government's money, the community share, and we just do it as a $35 million project. And the $2 million adaptation fund largely goes in, apart from the handful of people that we know are outside of protection. And then everyone's kind of in the same boat. That's the other way to look at it. Because I think the government, from speaking to the minister the other day, I got the impression that they would entertain that.
Yeah, I would just note that at this stage, the three businesses have specifically required that their business contributions be ring fenced to those two communities. Just want to note that, yeah, at this stage.
If I could comment just on my opinion on it, I think this is a project that should be going forward to the new committee after this, because you know, it's difficult to get councillors to make opinions on this, given that we're only a week or two away from elections closing. So I think it's, you know, it's unfair on both sides really for people to make, you know, so I think that's up. But if I could just make a couple of comments, you know, like up and down the coast, there's quite different ways of handling that. And as Daryl alluded to, the council, the regional council, are looking at a review of all the rating schemes and how they are doing it. So some rating schemes are all 100%, no matter where you live, they're just one rate, one classification. On others, I think we've got up to 12 or 13 different classifications on little schemes, you know, where the beneficiaries, the highest beneficiaries pay the most and the lesser beneficiaries. But if I could just look at Greymouth, that was actually done in 1980 after severe floods in 88. That scheme was sort of finished in 1991, late 1991. It's had almost 33 or 35 years close to of protection, but it's one rating, you know, classification, so everyone pays the same. But the net's been widened to go, if everyone knows, south of Paroa, out as far as Gladstone, who get no protection whatsoever. But the further you throw the net, the lesser it is a burden on, you know, the ratepayers. But I still get a lot of comments from property myself on the you know, quite away from the town. But I pay the same as a business that's classification, same amount on the capital value as a business is protected directly. So that needs a bit of a look at, but this is a new scheme for Westport, you know, but the wider you can throw the net, the cheaper it is on the people, because, you know, people are, like you say, are coming to spend their money at the local businesses, and they've been protected by in any sports centre or shop that's in town from it. So that's the thing. But whether the committee decides is a classification, but you do got to be careful with the double jeopardy that Daryl spoke for before, because it may be that, you know, Karamea and them, they're already paying into some schemes. So I did read in here, it was on this side of the Karamea Bluffs, but also like Punakaiki have got a rating scheme of their own, and they pay really heavily, and that's not supported by the people of Bulla, you know, of Westport. So it's they just pay 100% for their scheme. So it does need quite a conversation going forward. And I just, but I guess the initial paper was, it's got to be addressed sooner, because very soon we're going to have to start rating for Westport in some form. So that's a thing that's going to have to go to the community, and the sooner we address it, the better. So I believe that has anyone got any further initial views on it? Councillor McIntyre?
Yeah, I just want to agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. I just think that we need to wait till the result of the council, and then have a workshop, I would say this side of Christmas, and then make some pretty informed decisions going forward from there.
I wondered, Diana, if we could take that as an action in the action.
Yeah, I reckon an action point.
So just for clarity, what's the timeline on this? You'll be aiming for the new rating scheme to be in force by 1 July 26. Yeah.
Through the chair.
So, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that pretty much would want a decision either just side of Christmas or just after.
It's okay, that's okay. Any further discussion? I'll just move those to items 3 and 4. I think I'll have to change that. Provide initial views on changing to a differential rating scheme. So I think I'll move that to delay a decision till after the triennial elections. on the differential rating scheme for Westport. And then the fourth one was note the legal advice we sought and will be determined how to proceed with public consultation on implementing a differential rating scheme for Westport. So is everyone happy with that first one that I said? And that's delay until the delay till after the triennial agreement, triennial elections, the consideration of a differential rating scheme for Westport. And then the other one, the legal. Happy with that wording?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would have to be workshop.
I wonder if we
Yep.
could use that wording, but just add in there, Diane, and hold a workshop before
Yeah.
Christmas.
Okay.
For the new joint committee.
Exactly.
Right, so it's delay and hold a workshop prior to, after the final elections and prior to Christmas.
Very good,
Have we
Diane.
got it? I'm happy to move that.
I'll second it.
Yep, Mark McIntyre, all in favour, say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Right, item 8.4 now. Joint committee formation post-election. And the recommendation is the committee receive and note the report. So, mover for that, please. Councillor Cole, yep, moved by, seconded by Mayor Klein. All in favour, say aye. Against? Right, Tom, over to you. Now that's on page 65 of our papers today. Yep. Got your Tom, start again.
You want me to start again?
No, as long as they can hear on.
Yeah, start again.
Okay. Sorry, Jane. So this paper here is presented largely in response to a query we received from Councillor Howard about how things work, shifting from one employment to the other as far as joint committees are concerned. And what the induction provisions are for new members and community representatives. So I'm just going to speak very briefly to the report summary. So under the Local Government Act, committees are discharged at the end of the triennium unless councils resolve to continue them. And the West Coast Regional Council at least did resolve to do that at the last council meeting. And I understand that's the intent of Buller District Council as well. They've done it, okay. And then post-election, each council will appoint their respective members to each joint committee. And there's to be a range of induction activities, both individually within council to councillors, but also joint induction day proposed as well, between Buller District Council and West Coast Regional Council, and the part of that. As far as community representatives are concerned, so that's Jody and Pat. Yeah, I think what we're saying here is we acknowledge that there's been some induction work done as part of the nomination process, but I think there's more work to do here. So one thing we will commit to is for the next joint committee meeting, we'll present a paper that outlines where things are at with the scheme and with its development, and where things are at with its ongoing ownership and management. Okay. Any further questions on that?
Any questions? All happy? So so Jody and Pat will carry on through, and everyone else will be re-elected after the elections. Great. All good? Yep. Hope so. Okay, so that's all good. Thank you for that, Tom. Last item, general business. We have moved, haven't we, Deanne? Yep, got it, Mark. Item 9, general business. Any general business today? No general business? Okay. Okay, I'd just like to thank those members of the public that have attended in person today. Thank you, guys, and all those that are attending online. Yep.
Sorry, just thought of a matter of general business. I better thank you for your chairmanship, Peter, and the work you've done more generally at regional council to pull that into line and support Daryl and his establishment and his new team and the progress that is being made on the Westport flood scheme. I think everyone, if they could wish it, it would be here and built and there'd be diggers roaring in the background. But I think those that are such as myself that have been close to it understand the complexity of what we're trying to achieve here and the importance of it being done properly and the effect it's going to have on a lot of host properties that have got the, you know, various protections running through their property and things. They need to understand it and accept it and things as well. So yeah, in terms of your chairmanship, Pete, it's been really good working with you and wish you all the very best in your retirement.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that, Jamie. Thank you.
Yeah, could I just say, from me, Peter, look, I know that you've spent all your life living in Greymouth and you've been a big part of that community, but in terms of the you know, the issues for the region, there's been no parochialness with you. You've been equally interested and committed up here in Westport as you have been down in Friends and all the other schemes and communities in between. And everybody, you know, without Peter's coming in as the chair, you know, after the training and taking the lead, we wouldn't be in the position that we are. So look, thank you from me and the staff, Peter. Can I just also just finish with by saying to both Pat and Jody, given you two are fine and everyone else has to scrap it out to be back at the table, but for you two, please, you've got my phone number. If there's anything you ever want to talk about over the next few weeks, or you know, into leading up to 30 June next year with some of the big decisions we need to make, I'm only a phone call away. And please give us a ring. Thanks.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thanks, Jamie and Daryl, for those comments. And I can assure you that my heart is in the region. No matter where I've actually got properties in Bulla and Grey, and I've got a small section in Okarito, so my heart is in the region. So yep, so I'll still be here. So thanks very much. If that's the last of the general business, I'll declare the meeting closed at 3:26. And thanks everyone for their attendance. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks,
you.
team. Have a great afternoon.